All right, let's roll for initiative. Nice. Strange New Worlds. Episode review. Welcome, one and all, to Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1, Episode 8. We are already up to the almost penultimate episode of the season. This one's entitled The Elysian Kingdom. And before I go any further, if you don't want spoilers, please duck out now and come back after you've seen the episode. Or, if you don't mind, stick with it. Just realize you may have something spoiled for you. Before I get into the episode, I do want to touch on two behind-the-scenes photos for Strange New Worlds Season 2 that have released in the last couple of weeks, both of Captain Pike, played by Anson Mount. The first is his new look for Season 2, and I, for one, am all for this. I think it's a vast improvement over Season 1. It's just building on what we've already seen and just growing taller and taller into Season 2. Gonna love that. And we also see a time jump to 10 years in the future, Beep Chair Pike by Anson Mount. And I think that's a fantastic look as well. That's gonna look wonderful on screen. I cannot wait to see this all take place in Season 2. I am already getting excited for that. One thing, if I were to nitpick, is I wish they had also put the same effort into the tower of hair on the shadow. That's the only complaint I would have. Anyways, kicking off the episode, we start with a Chief Medical Officer's log from M'Benga on Stardate 2341.6, and I will stop right here because the synopsis for this episode completely stripped away any mystery that I had while watching it. I wish I had not read that before seeing the episode. It's hard not to, because when you click on the episode on the Paramount website, the freaking thing's right there. So even if you were trying to avoid it, you probably are going to see it. Gonna read it to you now. The USS Enterprise becomes stuck in a nebula that is home to an alien consciousness that traps the crew in a fairy tale. So if there was any doubt with what's going on in this episode, it's pretty much told to you right off the bat. We start out with M'Benga reading a book to his daughter. If you've been following along this season, you know this has been a sort of underlying plot line that we've seen. M'Benga's daughter has some sort of rare disease he cannot find a cure for, and he keeps her in the pattern buffer of the transporter, only releasing her very, very infrequently and reading to her from the book on those brief times they have together. She is telling him here basically that she doesn't like the way the book ends. She would rewrite part of the book if she could. Keep that in mind. It's going to be a major plot point later on. I'm going to say right now this is a fairly low stakes episode aside from this storyline. The rest of the plots don't really have that long-lasting of an impact, so it is almost a disposable episode aside from this one main plot. Okay, so we've got M'Benga now trying to do some sort of experimentation to try and, figure out a cure for his daughter. He starts using some sort of chemical he calls 3QND. Took a look online. Apparently that's an actual real thing, assuming it was the same intention as the show. It's a crystal structure of Ad37 fiber knob and complex with trivalent salic acid inhibitor. And no idea what that means, but it's kind of cool that they possibly went out of their way to use a real medical thing in the show. I'm not going to give that too many points for doing that because, it makes sense, but, they could have just thrown in some sci-fi techie thing that doesn't actually exist, and it could have just been as easy. So kudos for them going out of their way for that. Then we've got a shot of the bridge. They're finishing up their, mission, which is basically to study this nebula they're in. And Pike says, wow, I wish all our missions were this simple and easy. No battles, no, problems, nothing like that. Spock goes out of his way to do his little Vulcan thing about, don't you always tell me that humans have a superstition against calling attention to things that are too good, basically calling them out for jinxing it. And basically right after this happens, oh my God, it's jinxed. They can't move. The ship is stuck. They call M'Benga to the bridge, and when M'Benga arrives on the bridge, he is dressed like this. The bridge is decked out in, all sorts of old-timey looking castles and fairy, that sort of thing. So there's kingdom tapestries and goblets and giant piles of food and servants, and everyone's wearing, Renaissance fair garb. It's all quite interesting. And if that synopsis hadn't spoiled it for me, I might have been a little bit, what the hell's going on here? But since it did spoil it for me, I was expecting it. So it turns out Mbenga is the king of the realm, not necessarily the ship, because these characters don't realize they're on a ship. They believe they are in a kingdom. Now we've got this scene here of PIke, who is now not PIke. He is the servant, kind of a chief, second little guy to Mbenga's king, and he is very, very different from the PIke we have seen. He is very sniveling. He is very, not shady, but he's kind of a wimp, kind of scared of everything, and very unlike a captain would normally be. We've got some of our other characters in the back there. You can see Ortegas coming along. Then he goes down to sickbay to try and figure out what's going on. It seems to be some sort of old-timey witch doctor apothecary chapel here. Playing against Type again. Not really knowing what he's talking about. She seems to be very unskilled in medicine as opposed to the chapel we have grown to know in season 1 so far. I'm going to kind of flip through this. Then we get La'an coming in. She is some sort of fancy lady with her puppy, and the other evil queen just took over her land trying to get some sort of magical item. She gets to play this fun role where she's completely the opposite of the stuck-up, super rigid La'an that we've known so far. So far, it's, we're kind of introducing our characters one by one. Then she's got this, fun scene here where our characters are trying to figure out what's going on. Mbenga is, by the way, the only one who knows the only one that retains any knowledge of himself, the Enterprise, the whole situation. Everyone else seems to be completely taken over by their character, except, as we discover right here, Hemmer. Hemmer is being taken away for crimes against nature because he's, a magician. He's some sort of wizard. The Red Guard is hauling him away, and he calls out for Mbenga. Mbenga tries to save him. So far, these are the only two we've encountered who know there is actually a spaceship, that know things aren't exactly what they seem. We keep going along. Now we've got Ethan Peck Spock here playing basically Marcus from Babylon 5. He doesn't have much to do. He's supposed to be the counterpart to Hemmer and another wizard. They're like yin and yang, I guess. They keep flashing back to snippets of the storybook for each time they introduce a new character. That was kind of a neat little, I guess, shorthand for trying to display who they were. And we find out the evil queen is actually Uhura. Uhura. I don't know why I have trouble saying her name right now. And she's got this whole, second legion of army people down in, I guess it's supposed to be engineering. Not quite sure. And this, for whatever reason, this set piece, this scene right here reminded me very, very, very much of when they were doing that wonky mirror universe stuff in Discovery with the overacting and the set design of the starships there. It felt a lot like that sort of design aesthetic, except obviously not mirror universe. It's, fantasy evil queen layer. Then our characters get captured and put in jail, for lack of a better term, which is just a bunch of bars around the transporter, which kind of an interesting aesthetic. PIke doing a good job. I think PIke probably, aside from Hemmer in this episode, well, I guess I should say Anson Mount because he's not really playing PIke. Anson Mount probably does the best job of playing against Type, playing an opposite version of what he's doing, and I think he was just trying to have fun. I mean, I don't think he took this very seriously. He's just trying to goof around and have fun. His hair was very interesting in this episode. I don't know what to say about that hair, but, I guess that's probably the main subplot in this whole series is Pike's hair, and it is different in this episode. Hemmer decides to lean into the whole fact that he's a wizard and pulls out some sort of, I don't know what it is, some sort of plasma torch or something, and pretends that he's a wizard in front of everyone, cuts his way out, and they escape, and they escape, and now they're in a hall, and suddenly they get attacked by the Queen's guards. What are they going to do? Well, who haven't we seen in the episode that's a main character? That's right, Una Chin Riley. They're about to be taken out, and bunch of arrows start impacting the baddies. And guess who did it? Well, obviously, I already showed the picture. It's Zymira the Huntress, played by Una. And here is where Mbenga realizes this is not just playing out the storybook as he originally thought, because Zymira the Huntress and the character played by Ortegas never actually met in the story. However, his daughter, as I mentioned earlier, wanted to rewrite the ending of the story, and she shipped these characters. She wanted these two characters to be together, have a relationship, and they do in this version of events. So this leads M'Benga to realize it's not just some sort of weird thing where the storybook has come to life. This is based on his daughter's revision of the story, so it has to be related to his daughter instead of just being a storybook come to life. So they try to find his daughter. He goes down to sickbay, checks the pattern buffer. One thing I don't know if I made clear is the ship is functional as normal. The ship is still functional. The characters, aside from himself and Hemmer, have no idea what the ship is, though. They're in fantasy land, so they can't really interact with it. He can, Hemmer can, so that's cool, too. The ship is still functional. Checks the pattern buffer. His daughter's pattern is gone. Uh-oh. That's not good, because as we know, his daughter is dying if she's not in the pattern buffer. So he's freaking out. Now we get Hemmer doing his little magical thing again. They're surrounded by an army, and they're like, well, how are you going to stop us? You don't actually have magical powers, do you? And he's like, haha, boop, 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 pulls out a communicator, does a little boop magic thing, and beams them all to Cargo Bay 12 or something along those lines. It's a cool scene. I like the way that he's playing into the story, even though he doesn't actually have to. He's kind of just having fun with it, because it doesn't really seem like, even when things go wrong, that the stakes are for keeps. I mean, Una shot a bunch of crew members with arrows, and I'm pretty sure they're not dead. So it does seem like this is really a more goofy, no stakes type of situation. They're just trying to figure out how to get out of it. Then we have this discussion here where they get back to the quarters and find out that M'Benga's daughter is alive, and she is kind of been the one that is controlling it. Not really, though, but it is based upon her mind. M'Benga scans her. She has got no signs of sickness. She is completely 100% cured. Hemmer had mentioned earlier, and that's going to come into play now, that the reason he had not been taken over is at one point he felt some sort of consciousness pressing against his mind, but since he's such an acclaimed telepath, being an Enar, however you pronounce that, he was able to defend against it and keep the rewriting of its personality out of his head. So now we find out that M'Benga's daughter is the one controlling this via a friend she made in the nebula. So the nebula has some sort of consciousness going on that found M'Benga's daughter in the pattern buffer, assumed she was being trapped against her will and being forced not to have a childhood. She obviously was in there to save her life, but the outside forces looking in didn't really realize that, pulled her out of the pattern buffer, cured her, and let her, have this whole fantasy world to herself to kind of live the childhood she had been denied. Have this very sweet scene with M'Benga and a daughter here. Figures out that Hemmer can contact this outside visitor through his telepathic powers, even though it's not going to be comfortable for him. They have a chat. Everything gets explained. And it's now told that M'Benga's daughter is cured in this realm. It is cured in this nebula. Were she to leave the nebula, she would regain her illness and die all the same. What is a father to do? Now, two thoughts on this. They're given that choice, as I said. Leave the daughter here, or, well, I guess keep the entire ship here forever. Or leave the nebula and his daughter goes back to being deathly ill. He chooses to let his daughter live there by transcending her body and kind of merging with the nebula. This was a very emotional scene. Like, they played it up for a hell of an emotional gut punch. I don't know if I buy it, though. Like, logically, not enough time was given to this decision. It was like a 15-second discussion, and then he's like, you know what? I don't really actually know what this nebula is. It could be lying to me for all I know. Could be a trick, but what the hell? My daughter, who I've been, fighting against hope all this time for, defending her against everything, he suddenly decides to give it over. And I know it was, it makes sense story-wise, but not nearly enough was played build up towards it. It was just kind of a spur of the moment decision. It played out well, as far as we know. She gets taken away. Mbenga has about 10 seconds, maybe not even that long, to kind of sit back and think about his decision. And then she returns to him saying she's already lived, however many years because she's outside of time and space, blah, 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 that whole trope. And they have an emotional reunion scene, and they both kind of talk to each other for the first time in a while as adults. It was very sweet. Again, very emotional, but I just don't, sorry, I got so over enthusiastic I punched my mic. I just don't know if I buy how quickly it resolved itself when so much of the episode up until this point was a waste of time. I mean, not in a necessarily a bad way, but okay, I guess I'm done with the episode now, and I'll give my overall thoughts. It is discussed here that basically the entire crew except Mbenga have no memory, including Hemmer, so they have a gap of 5 hours in their memory. Anyways, so that was the only part that was really gnawing at me. It's just this whole farcical, fantastical, goofy thing, and then we play the last 5 minutes as an emotional gut punch. He loses and then regains his daughter, and that whole storyline is wrapped up. I don't know, maybe if they had structured it half and half, like had the fantasy setting only take place over half of the episode and have the other half be, some serious deep diving into this relationship with his daughter, because it was way too rushed, and I didn't buy the quick spur of the moment decision. I feel like he would have struggled with that a hell of a lot more than he did. It was a 50+ minute episode. The fantasy stuff it dragged on too much. There were some interesting moments. It was nice seeing the characters playing, against type, but this, to me, would have made a lot more sense in, let's say, season 3. Some of the characters haven't even gotten their own episode yet. Some of the characters we have not had a chance to even see in their normal incarnation, let alone see enough of them to have this play against type thing really have an impact. I would think this would be a season 3. All of our characters have been established. Ortegas has not had anything to do in any episode until this one. The first time Ortegas really gets a chance to shine, she's not even playing her own character. She's playing this, badass guard thing of the king. Again, seems like they're just working their way down the checklist of Star Trek tropes. This was the sentient gas alien, the sentient energy alien that inhabits a realm outside of our normal space-time, the cloud aliens that we saw primarily in TOS, but a couple of times in TNG and Enterprise as well. I think even DS9. And it also was the pocket dimension, altered reality, holodeck mishap type of episode. Obviously, in the original series, they didn't have holodecks, so we couldn't have a holodeck mishap. But in like TNG Forward, this is the sort of thing that would have happened on a holodeck mishap and or a Q altered pocket dimension, as far as like something like Cupid or something along those lines. DS9 did it. So there's a lot of episodes this seemed to be drawing inspiration from. I'm not going to list them all because it was doing its own thing. It reminded me kind of like the Flotter episode of Voyager, where it was just such a departure, where it kind of felt tonally out of place with Star Trek, at least the series it was in. And I don't know why, but it also reminds me very much of an old Cosby Show episode. I think it was toward the end of that series where they had some weird Fantasyland episode that was, I guess, taking place in, I don't really remember. Was it a dream, or was it just one of the kid characters was coming up with a fantasy? I don't know, but it reminded me a hell of a lot of that for some reason. I don't know why. Overall, I think your mileage on this episode is going to 100% depend on how much you like, these characters playing against type in a Fantasyland type setting. I liked PIke being a different type of character, and I really liked Hemmer. We haven't had much to do with Hemmer. He wasn't playing against type, but he was playing into the story, and I liked that. I think those two were probably the highlights. And La'an playing the weird, over the top damsel type character was cool as well. Always nice to see a dog in Star Trek as well. I'm very mixed on this episode. I don't think I liked it, but I don't think I hated it either. And aside from the M'Benga storyline, I guess it's just kind of a nice diversion that didn't really land with me because it's so early on in the series. If this was paced better and located in season 3 after we'd grown with everyone, I think I would have found a lot more to enjoy in it. Also, and this is probably because the story was structured on a storybook, so I'm not going to ding it as much as I normally would. It was very stage play-esque. So it was very like, here's a scene. Here's a scene. Here's a scene. There was no interconnected, interwoven, like, real story going on. It was just like, here's a set piece, here's a set piece, here's a set piece, kind of like a high school play type thing. But it's probably because it was structured based on like chapters of a children's book. So if that's the case, I can understand that there's not really an overarching, save the kingdom, save the world, type of grand story, because it really wasn't ever set up to be that way. It was just a nice window dressing to see our characters acting in absurd ways while M'Benga's dealing with his personal story. And as I already mentioned, if M'Benga had a lot more time to struggle with this decision before coming to it, maybe try one last ditch effort to figure out a way to keep his daughter on board and cure her before just saying, all right, get the hell out of here, merge with this weird nebula I know nothing about. Because that seems like a poor decision for a father who has been working this long and this hard to save his daughter. I don't know. The emotions of that scene, very, very impactful. The logical decision of that scene, very underwhelming. But it seemed to all work out in the end, and I'm curious to see if we ever touch on this story again, or if that's kind of been wrapped up. Anyways, I've been rambling on long enough. I still think I need some more time to digest this episode in the season as a whole once the season finishes. I'm going to leave it there for now. So until next time, computer and program.